Good afternoon. Welcome to our Northern Power Grid webinar, Maximising the Value of EVs for our Customers. I'm Helen Priestley, Stakeholder Manager at Northern Power Grid. I'm going to introduce the colleagues we have here today.
Hi, my name is Anne Baumer. I'm Sustainability Manager at Northern Power Grid.
Hi, my name is Paris Odysseus. I'm a Smart Grid Development Engineer from the Power Grid.
And I'm Ian Miller, the Head of Innovation.
Okay, and we're so glad so many of you could join us today. We're going to walk through the agenda and then we're going to talk about the format of the session. So first things first, we're going to introduce our business, give you a little bit more information about Northern Power Grid. We're going to talk about the kinds of stakeholders we engage with, a bit of background around EVs in our region, and then we're going to talk about the document I think you've all received, Maximising the Value of Electric Vehicles for Our Customers. We're going to talk about EVs in the energy system, more information about connections and future developments, and then I'm going to summarise the future events and engagement opportunities you can get involved in after the webinar, and then we're hopefully going to have a significant amount of time for questions and feedback. So we would welcome your questions, and we're going to get through as many as we can at the end. So in terms of format, so for the session, we're going to do, as I've mentioned, 15 to 20 minutes presentation, followed by Q&A. As we all know, in terms of a webinar, it's a listening mode for you, and we're the ones who are speaking and responding to your questions. Please give us feedback or ask questions at any point during the webinar using the question bar on your screen. And we've got a couple of polls we'd really welcome your views on. Your questions, as I've mentioned, will be answered at the end of the session, or if we don't manage to get through them, we're going to come back to you with responses. And we would welcome your feedback. We're learning as we go in terms of webinars, so please give us feedback about your experience today at the email address that's listed there. So to kick everything off, we're going to start, as we need to go on, with a live poll. So you'll see the screen in front of you, and we'd really like to make sure that we're tailoring the content of today's webinar. So please let us know if you're a consultant, if you're a local government representative, a fleet manager or charge point installer, you're working for other utilities, or we haven't covered you in terms of category on our list. So we'll give you a few moments for you to respond to our poll, and then we'll move on. That's great. Thank you very much, everybody, for responding to that. That helps us immensely. So I'm going to hand over now to the main body of our discussion today, and Anna's going to lead us through.
Thank you, Helen. I'm going to start briefly with an introduction of who we are and what we're discussing here today. So Northern Power Grid is a local distribution network operator in Yorkshire and North East. We're operating across very geographically diverse areas, and we're heavily regulated by Ofgem. As a DNO, we're there 24/7 to keep your lights on, your EVs charged, and we're there if you happen to have power cuts as well. To illustrate that better, we've put a diagram in here, so to say that we are the element between electricity transmission and consumption. And when it comes to EVs, we're also doing our part effectively by adding 40 charging points and 5 EV cars to our fleet this year, and we're not going to stop there. So this is just the beginning. Normally we engage with our stakeholders at a point of connection. However, there are many opportunities throughout the year where we can speak to you and you can speak to us. We have connection surgeries and a number of other opportunities that Helen is going to summarize at the end of the slide deck. The reason why we're so increasingly we get a lot of questions and a lot of conversations are around electric vehicles, electric vehicle charging. So I'm going to set a little bit of background to this topic. And decarbonization in transport is the most significant driver for these conversations, as currently transport is one of the emissions-intensive sectors of the UK economy. And unlike other sectors, the emissions from transport have only fallen by 2% since 1990s. As a result of that, there were a number of government policies, introduced in 2018. The main one of them was Road to Zero, which set out government's intentions to ban fossil fuel-powered vehicles by 2040 and increase their support for electric transport and charging of electric vehicles. They have been further supplemented by the net zero target adopted this year, and we see a number of local authorities in our region announcing climate emergencies and thinking about their next steps in terms of low carbon transportation, introducing ultra low emission zones and clean air zones and associated fees for that. So there's quite a lot of work going on locally and nationally to adopt more electric vehicles and means of transport overall. We have seen that in our regions as well, where the ownership of electric vehicles and installations of electric vehicle charging points have increased. As you see in the graph in this slide, we foresee that the number of electric vehicles owned in our regions is going to multiply several times in the years to come. That obviously has an impact on our network as well. So to inform the network planning, we use a range of forecast scenarios. And when we're looking at these forecasts, electric vehicle uptake is one of the biggest factors that's going to impact where and how we can see the load growth in the future. Overall, in the next 5 to 10 years, we see very little impact on our network as a whole, but obviously it depends on the locality and the regional characteristics of it. To verify these assumptions in our forecasts, as you can see, we use around 8 of them for our purposes. We are looking at further engagement opportunities throughout the course of this year and the beginning of next, which I will elaborate more on at the end of the slide deck. But now let me hand over to Paris to talk us through how we're maximizing the value of electric vehicles for our customers.
Thank you. Thank you, Anda. So we've recently published a report which sets out the activities we're planning to do to enable the electrification of transport, as well as what we think needs to happen going forward. Anda and I are going to touch on some of the key sections during this webinar, but please refer to the full document for more information, which is available on our website. I think we'll also going to send you a copy after this webinar finishes, along with the slides. So in our document, we're providing guidance on selecting charging sizes and things to consider, such as number of charge points needed, cars using the charge point at the same time, amount of time drivers will spend at the premises, existing connection capacity, on-site generation, and so on. We provide connection guidance for different types of customers, such as existing and new domestic customers, customers wanting to connect high-rating chargers or large volumes of chargers, for example, in car parks, local authorities, or fleet managers. We also describe the new process that we and other DNOs introduced recently to simplify the connection of EVs and hopefully bring consistency across DNOs. It provides useful information on the self-service connection tool that we are currently developing, which we're hoping that will enable customers to assess the viability of their proposed connection ahead of making a formal application. And finally, in addition to the information in the booklet, it's also important to highlight that our experts are always available either on the phone or by attending one of our monthly surgeries that we run. And there are some links there for you guys to follow and get yourselves in touch with our experts. Our booklet also has some indicative overview of new connection quotation times and costs according to capacity required. I'm not going to go through the table line by line, but feel free to refer to it to get an estimate of the connection costs of various charger sizes. And please note that these figures are purely indicative as the connection costs are site-specific. We've also, in our report, we talk about the technical policy that the work that we did around technical policy. We continuously update and improve our policies to provide clear guidance not only to our designers, but to third parties such as IDNOs, ICPs, as well as customers. We've reviewed, for example, the standard sizes across the whole of our asset suite. We provide clarity on earthing arrangements for different types of connections. We've updated the diversity figures used for general domestic load plus charge points up to 32 amps and published clear guidance on how to assess other EV charge point facilities such as unmetered public as well as larger ones. Note that the figures in the table are for the 100th customer, not the average figure per customer. So, for example, the load for 100 customers would be 540 kVA as opposed to what would someone calculate to be 427. A key pillar of our ED1 business plan is our £83 million Smart Grid Enablers investment, which is preparing our network for the rapid growth of EVs, heat pumps, and other low-carbon technologies. As part of that, we're rolling out monitoring equipment and control units in our substations, which we're hoping that will give us greater ability to control and analyze how the network operates in real time. It should also enable us to get better understanding of capacity currently available on the network, which will potentially facilitate a moderate increase in demand, including EVs, simply through better use of monitoring of existing assets. And ultimately, the program introduces network flexibility by allowing us to operate it within smarter, more efficient and cost-effective practices. In a world of intermittent and time-dependent generation, flexible load, and the potential to increase the overall value for customers, the flexibility is important. Although EVs are generally expected to increase the demand on our network, we think that they can also be a solution to local constraints if that load is managed or even if they're used to export to the grid. We believe that the government has a key role to play to enable this flexibility, this flexible load through tax and commercial incentives, and such actions could complement any technology-related activities that we undertake to maximize the capacity available from existing assets. We have a variety of smart network flexibility tools to address various network constraints, and we've also published data of where we consider customer flexibility solutions may provide suitable alternatives to reinforcement. We expect that when jointly implemented, combination of time of use tariffs and flexibility services will be key to managing the load on our networks. And without going into the flexibility program in too much detail, you can find more about it on our DSO version 1.0 plan, which is accessible on our website. And please note that we are going to publish the updated version of this report very soon. So I think it's sometime this week. So finally, we have a number of EV-related innovation projects in our wider innovation project portfolio, which explore the potential impacts and benefits EVs could bring to our customers and the energy system. I'm not going to go through them, all of them in greater detail, but a few ones to touch on is silent power, which is an alternative to mobile diesel generation, which we use to supply customers who would otherwise be off supply. GenDrive, which builds on our award-winning ACE project and explores whether social media and gamification can significantly influence EV charging loads. And finally, micro-resilience and resilient homes explore how batteries can maintain electricity supply to either isolated communities, critical infrastructure, as well as electrically dependent customers. Thank you, and back to Anda to talk to us about future developments and engagement opportunities.
Thank you. We recognize that as a local DNO, we are a key enabler for electrical vehicle charging infrastructure. However, to maximize the value for customers, to maximize the value of EVs, and to enable the electrification of transport to happen and increase in the future, we're not the only entity to contribute to this transformation. So we recognize there are wider industry developments that need to happen. Some of them are related to the retail market, such as the role of smart meters and introduction of hourly settlement, as well as wider time of use tariff propositions, which are related to smart meters, obviously. And then, in addition to flexibility, there are wider reforms currently being worked on in terms of network charging, which are looking at connection charges and the use of system charges, which are obviously going to affect how the future is going to look like. And in parallel, energy system is quite dynamic at the moment, and the DNOs are considering how they then transition to the role of distribution system operator, and quite a lot of work is being done in this area. And finally, there is a role for open data to play in all of this too. In terms of our thinking about transition to DSO, as Paris already mentioned, we published a first document of our thinking of what the future might look like last year in December. Since then, we've gathered stakeholder feedback on that, and we are currently working to update this document and publish it very soon. As I mentioned earlier, we're using a range of forecasting scenarios to inform our planning, and this year we have committed to publish our scenarios and our forecasts using the local excellence that we have in Open Data Institute in Leeds. So we will take an open data approach to verifying our forecasting scenarios, and the timeline for that is shown on the slide here. So we are expecting to publish this in December, and then looking for some verification and stakeholder engagement in the first half of the next year. And you can read more about that on ODI website. And now back to Helen.
Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. We just wanted to talk to you briefly about some opportunities for further engagement, recognising that we're going to have time to cover a whole host of questions in a moment. So we just wanted to walk you through some of our face-to-face engagements, because we know this is a complex topic and it's important that we can respond to your questions and discussions clearly. So as we've already highlighted, we do have connection surgeries which are advertised on our website monthly, which is your opportunity as our stakeholders and customers to meet with some of our engineers to talk about your particular issue, your particular scenario, and work through it face-to-face. So those are pretty critical. We also have our first local authority forum, which I'm sure some of you have signed up for, which is on the 25th of October, in a week or so's time in York, where we're going to be talking about EVs and some of the discussions from today, as well as giving an update on our DSO plans. We have an ICP seminar on the 8th of November and our Connections Customer Forum on the 20th of November. And then at the end of November, on the 29th of November, we've got our annual Stakeholder Summit at Cloth Hall Court, Leeds, which is your opportunity to meet with some of the team that are here today, but also our executive and many of our team members to talk you through how we're performing in terms of our strategy to date, and also looking forward to our next planning round and some of the big prizes that we're preparing to gain your views on. We are also putting plans in place for a dedicated EV event, which we will update you all on in early February next year. Our events, our workshops and connection surgeries, they're all bookable via the link you see in front of you. And please, if there is anything that is missing from what you see there, we're really willing to be flexible and to respond to that. So we're going to move on to questions and feedback next. So I'll move on to this. So we're going to have a look at some of the questions that we've had submitted, which are coming thick and fast. I'm going to do my best in terms of facilitating this session, and I'm going to look to my colleagues to respond to your questions. Because of our time constraints and because we've got a number of questions to get through, if you bear with us, and there may be some questions that need a very detailed response, so we will perhaps take some of those offline and respond to you individually. But I'm going to kick off in terms of questions in a moment. So we're going to go right up to the top and have a look at the first question. Okay, so we've got a question from Stuart. Thank you, Stuart. And the question is, does Northern Power Grid ever see a situation where it would control a consumer's charger to stop or reduce charging? And I'm looking to my right. Ian, would you like to comment on that question?
Yeah, I'll take that. Hi, Stuart. It's been a while. I think the honest answer to that is I desperately hope not, but ultimately there may be situations where the choice is between overloading the network to the extent that the customer goes off supply and they lose a full supply, or controlling the charging of the vehicle in some way so they still have the supply to the rest of their property. So it's not desirable. You'd hope to do it by time of use tariffs and through the commercial and retail areas. If push comes to shove, we have a duty not to overload the network, and if the capability is there, we'd want to use it, and that's probably in everybody's interests. It wouldn't be my first choice, so.
Thanks very much, Ian. I'm going to move on to the next question. So let's have a look. I'm not sure. Jeff, we're going to respond to your question next. My colleagues are looking at some of the technical information now. But Jeff, you stated you modelled 8 adoption scenarios and showed a graph. Can we have some more information about what those scenarios are, team?
Sure. We use a range of scenarios. Some of them are built on National Grid's future energy scenarios, which I'm expecting you're familiar with, and some of them are kind of bespoke scenarios developed for us by Element Energy. So we use them to plan for the uncertainty of what the future might look like, because we don't really know. And this, I suppose, is one of the reasons why we're through Open Data Institute looking to some further verification, sense checking of this data with our stakeholders later this year. Our scenarios do not only take account of electric vehicle ownership and charging point installation increases. They also look at technologies such as solar PV, heat pumps, and general changes in demand, whether it's growth or decrease in that. And as such, we've seen some decrease for the demand over the last 10 years. And now we see some increase in EVs. However, we're not certain to what extent and how it's going to change in the future.
That's great. Thank you, Ando. I'm just going to do a couple of housekeeping that I know a number of you are interested in. We will send details about how to about the local authority forum after this event, and also the slides will be available. We'll be sending those back out after the event, just to confirm. So we're going to move on to a question about flexibility. That's one from Greg. So team, please can you explain how our flexibility services will work and how it will be rolled out. Big question. We might not be able to cover that in full detail, but we'll have a go. Now, who would like to respond to that? Paris. Paris is going to have a go. Thanks, Paris.
Thanks for the question, Greg. I think I would firstly point you towards the DSO document that we've published recently, but also we're publishing again sometime this week, the version 1.1 I think will be. But in a high level, I think we're looking to procure flexibility services in a number of areas instead of the traditional reinforcement works. And without really going, I mean, I've shown a table on the slides earlier, which shows the cases for the use cases for customer flexibility. So when we went out and to procure a service, that going forward, we'll be looking to defer spending on traditional reinforcement, manage the risk of power cuts, for example, during long duration construction periods, or even use flexibility services to provide emergency support during unplanned power cuts. So we are more actively trying to look into flexibility instead of doing the traditional, which is laying more cable into the ground or replacing assets like for like. But as I said, we'll have more information on it in our DSO plan version 1.1.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to move on. Hannah has got a great, very practical question here. So for a new development, how many kVA do you suggest is assumed per car charging point? Paris, would you like to respond again?
Yes, thank you, Helen. Thank you, Hannah. So as I said, we have RLV code of practice. We have diversity figures after diversity maximum demands figure we use for our network design. So, and as I said earlier, the figure, the table that I showed earlier table that I shown earlier has figures for up to 100 customers, and it's, as I said, it's for the nth number of customer, not the average, the figure across the average number of customers. So we use those figures so we calculate those figures off the back of the CLNR project that we did a few years ago. We've informed those. So our customer network evolution project we did a couple of years ago. We've informed those figures from other projects other DNOs did. So I would refer you back to that document, which provides some guidance on the figures that we use, bearing in mind that we see that figure across a number of customers. So for a smaller number of customers or an IDNO networks, or if you're calculating the maximum demand for a block of flats, then that figure might be different, but certainly can provide a starting point. And please have a look at the document, have a look at the LV code of practice, and do not hesitate to contact me or any other of our design team managers if you have any further questions.
That's great. Thank you, Paris. So Martin, you've got a great question here. So demand is not expected to raise much over the next 5 to 10 years, but then increase. What solutions or proposals are in place for increased generation required to meet this demand? I think that's an Ian question.
Yeah, and I'm going to give a slightly unsatisfactory answer because I have to give you a straight answer. We don't own or operate generation. We will, of course, connect it and give it access to the kind of the distribution grid and beyond that transmission grid if people ask us to. But we don't actually plan in the generation ourselves. That is, it's a competitive market, and it's up to those generation companies to do that or not. I think it's a very, very valid question, though, because I think, particularly if we think about the types of generation that might be there in the future, if it's wind, if it's PV, things like that, and when you're going to want to charge your car, charge your EV, it's a very valid question. I can't give you a satisfactory answer on that because it's outside the remit of what this organisation does and what we're expected to do. So I'm going to have to leave it there, unfortunately.
Okay, thanks very much, Ian. Now we've got a really comprehensive question from Mike. So Mike, a big thank you for this question. I'm going to try and do it justice by reading it through for those of you who are not able to see the questions. So, under the new rules of green technologies, EVs and heat pumps, which have a total MD of, say, 78, i.e. over 60 amps, require an application rather than just notification. There is an implication that there might be a cost to the end user. Is this so, even if the cutout is 80 amp, i.e. above the new MD? If there is a possibility of a charge, why are MPG penalising green technologies where non-green technologies could be incrementally added up to the 80 amp without notification or application? So Ian's going to crack on with this question, and then we might draw in Paris for a bit more information.
Yeah, I'll start with the history, and hi Mike, it's been a while since we spoke as well. If people are within their service capacity, then they have a right to connect that. And that is true whether you are an individual staying within your service capacity, or you're a housing association or local council, making sure that all your properties stay within their capacity, but rolling out some changes to a lot of properties. And possibly heat pumps is more pertinent to that than EV charging points, but perhaps not. Now that was a change that we managed to persuade Ofgem to put through last time. In the past, things that the housing associations or councils did were charged in a different way. It was a Mitcham Gardens ruling for people with long memories. But we've brought that back so that if you have a capacity of, say, 80 amps, then you can connect up to 80 amps, and that is your right. Now, if that causes us to need to do reinforcement on our network, we will go and do it. We will not be charging you for it. We might ask you to give us time to do it, but we will not be charging you for it. We will not be discriminating between whether that's electric showers or heat pumps. That isn't our place to do so. People are entitled to connect the load they wish, and if the country feels it wishes to favour one source of load rather than another, that is for the country to make that decision through the regulator or through BEIS or people like that, not for a private company like ourselves to make those sorts of decisions. I don't know if there's anything you'd add to that, Paris?
No. I mean, the only thing that I would add is, so I'm on the working group that that decided, or that produced those application forms and set a 60 amp figure. I think that the background to that is that the majority of cutouts in the UK are between 60 and 80 amps. So we said that if the cutout has an 80 amp fuse in it and is rated at 80 amps, we won't be charging for anything. We just said that because it's getting to a threshold where it might actually go beyond what's typically available in legacy networks, we said that it would be better practice for customers to apply for that connection so that we have visibility of it and make the relevant checks to ensure that the network is safe and secure and able to provide customers with the load
and we don't blow the customers.
And we don't blow the customers or the cable or
which would be a bad thing.
Yes. No, thank you. I would just pause for a moment, recognising we've got a significant number of people on the webinar today, which we're very grateful for. But this is your opportunity, having some of our engineering team with us today, Paris and Ian and Anda with expertise in EVs. So if you would like to put through any more questions, I think we will be able to respond to a few more. So please, whether they're detailed or whether they are very specific, whatever they are, we would welcome them. So Lisa has just commented on some of the discussion and has noted that the SEC 046 would let you control the EV in an emergency. Have we got any response to that, team?
I need to take that one away.
Ian's responded. You need to take that
the only thing that I would say is that I'm not familiar with the SEC 46, but all I can say on this is that nationally DNOs and government are working together through the EV Energy Task Force. I'm on one of the products of that task force, and we're looking into the minimum requirements for smart charge points. So cybersecurity is a very important element of it. So is this thing of DNOs being able to, in rare cases, have some sort of control of charge points, not to not necessarily to switch them off, but to curtail them in a way that would ensure the network can operate safely. As I said, the EVT are about to publish something in the next couple of months. The Olive consultations came out on smart charging and EV charge points in general, so different parties have touched on that from what I believe. So we'll take the question away, Lisa, but yeah, there's a lot of work being done on not only EV emergency signals, but also signals to smart chargers in general.
Thank you, Paris. And Brian's commented on one of our earlier questions. He's commented that the first question, the discussion sounds like electricity could be the new broadband. Any comments, team, from that analogy?
I hope it's more reliable than that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, and we've just had a question in from Craig. Craig's asking, what are the timescales for vehicle-to-grid EV rollout across the Northern Power Grid network area? Do you want to give a little bit more information about the project, Ian, before we move into timescales? I'm not sure that everybody on the webinar will have a clear view of what we're referring to.
Yeah, vehicle-to-grid refers to the capability of what is a fairly large battery within even the most modest of electric vehicles. For example, the Nissan Leaf 2018 version 40 kilowatt hour battery, that has enough energy to run the domestic property for about 4 days. So there's a lot of energy tied up in there, and when you look at the kind of fleet of all UK cars becoming EVs, Nissan Leafs at 40 kilowatt hours, you get around about a day and a half's worth of present electrical use tied up in that. Now that doesn't cater for growth in heat pumps and EV charging, but equally it doesn't cater for the existing embedded generation, things like that. So it's a chunky number however you look at it. So the question arises, how can we use all that free-ish? You know, somebody's bought it, but it's incidental to the network, so they need it for the car. But it's parked up for maybe 20 hours a day. How do we use that for useful and good things that would help everybody out, and presumably pay people some amount of money for their trouble and for the providing the use of the vehicle? We're involved in 2 trials in this. One is the stunningly entitled Vehicle to Grid trial. We were very creative with the title of that one, and that's basically just looking at the technicalities of how you do it, and it's quite interesting the differences between doing something in a lab and actually doing it on a network. Little things like those. We have struggled to get over the one-to-one relationship between a charger and the vehicle. So if you park up a different vehicle at that charger, or you park up that vehicle at a different charger, do you get the full functionality? Well, certainly in the early generation stuff that we have been investigating there, you don't. So that's going through some of the interesting technical bits and pieces. We're also part of a larger trial. I think it might be the largest in the country at 1,050 installations and 10 million, but that's still rolling out at the moment, and we'll see how that goes. But that's
Can I just interject, Ian? I think we've had apologies everybody on our webinar, and thank you for your patience. I think we have had a slight technical issue with Ian's response to that question. So I'm just going to ask Ian to summarise. I know some of you have dropped out in terms of sound. So just for completeness, just for vehicle to grid, in a nutshell, Ian. Okay,
doing this very quickly. Vehicle to grid is trying to use the batteries that are in the cars. They're big batteries relative to general electrical usage. When you multiply up the number of vehicles that will be out there, to do something for the common good, and to pay those people who are willing to help out something for their trouble. We're involved in 2. One is called Vehicle to Grid, which is a technical trial, trying to get the technicalities. The other is E4 Future, which is trying to sort out the commercial issues. Vehicle to Grid is relatively small by comparison, but E4 Future, I think, will be the biggest EV trial in the country by the time it's finished. When is it going to happen? Well, these things are all still in trial. Nobody's actually proven you can do this at scale yet. Everybody's reasonably confident it will be possible. The only question is when. nor has anybody proven that it will stack up financially in the long term, or that people will be socially, the social acceptability of allowing your car to be used as part of the grid. I think all these things will stack up, but nobody's proven it yet. And in terms of actual timescales, we're a number of years away from it being commonplace here, there, and everywhere.
That's great, and apologies if you experience that technical difficulty. In terms of vehicle to grid and our innovation projects, I know that Ian and his team are really happy to have further discussions offline with regards to them if you have any particular ones, or if they align with any of your, if you're a local authority and you have some trials that you're considering, if you want to reach out to us, we're very welcome. We would welcome your discussions. So moving back to the questions, so Mike's got another great question up, which I'm going to read through. So with indications of range and price parity between EVs and ICE vehicles being zero by 2025, are MPG's predictions on increase in demand realistic? I think, Andrew, you're going to have a crack at that one.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mike. That's a very good question, and we've been asking that internally to ourselves as well. I'm delighted to hear that you've read these positive news. I think we're all looking forward to that price parity as well. When we're looking at our forecasts, as I said, we use a range of scenarios with different assumptions just to check what the uncertainty is and take our decisions respectively, depending on what that variability might be. So in the next 10 years, we see that the uptake, which currently is around 15,000 in both of our areas in North East and Yorkshire combined, it could be up either between 10 to 65 times, so between 150,000 to over 1 million vehicles. But we don't know which of the scenarios and what uptake rate will materialize, and that is why we're welcoming the feedback through ODI leads on our future forecasts, which will be published in December. And you'll have the opportunity to speak with us about that at our events that Helen neatly summarized as well.
Okay, thanks very much, Anda. I think you've raised the opportunity for more questions on vehicle to grid, Ian. So Anthony's asked a follow-up question. He is intrigued, which is good to know. As we know, the higher the depth of discharge, the less your battery lifetime. Anthony thinks the concept is great, but is there enough of a payment incentive when providing vehicle to grid to offset the reduced battery lifetime? He's looking forward to our project outcomes, and it would be great if EVs and vehicles to grid could power heat pumps, etc., as the potential impact of EV and heat pump demand could be significant. Comments, team?
Yeah, I'll take that one. And first of all, let me declare I am not an automotive battery expert. I don't think anybody around the table here is, nor have we any intention of being so, because that would be very interesting for us, but it probably wouldn't move this company on very much. However, we do talk to people who are, and I'm thinking of talking to particular likes of Nissan who are very heavily into V2G, and they would point out that when you look at the kind of power outputs from a battery that's being used for V2G purposes, as opposed to a car that's doing even fairly mild acceleration. Look at the kilowatts it takes to accelerate a car. Even if you've got a petrol car or diesel car, you can probably go and check the rating of your engine in kilowatts relatively easily. We're talking about maybe outputting 3, 4, 5 kilowatts in a V2G situation. We're not talking about putting out tens of kilowatts. So the battery's not really being used that hard. And the guys at Nissan tell me they're actually gently exercising the battery to and forth rather than leaving it sat at a particular set point. Particularly bad, of course, with a lithium battery be fully charged. But leaving it at a particular point and just leaving it sat there isn't a good thing, and actually gently exercising it might actually be advantageous. I don't know if there's any other comment on that, or...
The only other thing that I would say is that we have V2G obviously is about movable batteries, but we have a project, an innovation project that looks into fixed batteries and how we could use them to power heat pumps and provide some device-side response. Which that project has just started, so we don't have much data on it yet. We also have another project that looks into domestic solar panels and battery storage, which is about to come to an end. And in that project, which I'm the project manager of, we have taken into consideration the costs that the customers could incur by DNOs or DSOs or whoever, aggregators or suppliers controlling their batteries. So it's a very good question, and it's something that, at least for the project that I'm involved in, we're considering, which means that surely other similar projects, whether they are fixed batteries or movable batteries, they will be considering as well.
Okay, we're getting a number of other questions in, but I would welcome, I realise we've got a thread that's talking about vehicle to grid, which is going to continue for a moment. But if those of you who are listening to the webinar would like to ask more broad questions around EV charging or our document that we've published around EV readiness more broadly, please, this is your opportunity. So I'm just going to carry on with vehicle to grid very momentarily and then move on to another subject. So Mike's continued the discussion, stating, the OVO trial would add 14,000 miles equivalent to his lease for very little money. So he is concerned over battery life. Any comments, team?
I don't have a huge amount to add to that. I mean, it's not going to have no effect on battery life. The guys at NISN are telling me it makes it slightly better, that it conditions the battery better. If what OVO are saying is that they think it adds some stress to the battery, then that's fair comment. I think I'm not an automotive battery expert. I tend to believe what NISN are telling me about the Leaf battery. They're not trying to sell me one, so they should know their own kit. But yeah, it may be the case, and yeah, there is a risk involved, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Ian, and thanks very much, Mike, for continuing that conversation. We've got a question in from George. I'm going to ask the team here in Castleton today, but I recognise that there may be some people actually on the webinar that might want to comment on this also. So please do, rather than asking a question, if you want to comment on George's question, please provide more information to us. So George is asking, when do you estimate it will be viable for EVs, for HEVs to be viable?
Good
Any
question.
comments?
It's a very good question, and we're actually looking into that very same sort of question ourselves, not as people who will connect up and charge HEV EVs. We might be. In fact, if they arrive, we probably will be. But as people who might run either 3.5 ton, 7.5 ton, or HEV type vehicles, which you can imagine as a company that digs up roads and lays cables and puts overhead lines in the air. We do that sort of thing every day. So I don't have the answer. We are looking, and we're looking quite actively. At the moment, I'm not seeing anything that I would buy in this country. I hear lots of rumours from the likes of Tesla and a few others in the States, but at the moment, I don't see anything that's being offered in the UK that looks sensible as a pure EV, a battery EV. Okay,
thank you, Ian. I'm just going to turn to my colleagues because day in, day out, they have a number of questions that they get asked. And there is a particular question that your stakeholders have been asking you that relates to this webinar that you think it would be good to share with the wider group.
I think one of the most frequent engagements that I've experienced is questions from local authorities who have announced climate emergencies or are generally looking at what they're planning to do with their own fleets or what they need to put in place to facilitate the people locally to be able to charge, and where and how much. So we've had a lot of conversations with the local authorities and local enterprise partnerships across the organization, also at my team. So when we were developing the document that we've largely talked you through today, we included a few useful case studies and tools that are either developed or in development, as well as specific advice on how would be the best way to engage with us. And to sum up, please start the conversation with us early. We're interested that we kind of plan ahead and plan ahead of the time to do that constructively.
That's great. Thanks, Sandra. And I'll turn to my colleagues in a moment. But we have had another question from Craig on the topic of batteries and cars. So Craig's commenting, with battery capacity increasing across car models, do 7 kilowatt charge points still have a future, or should 22 kilowatt now be the minimum for local authorities looking to the rollout for EV points? Views team. So we're looking to, actually we've got lots of volunteers for this question. So we'll start with Ian and then we'll move across the table.
I think there's a couple of things. If you look at the kind of average mileage that people do in this country, it equates roughly to 10 kilowatt hours a day. That's 10 kilowatt hours. That's roughly the same as a house, strangely enough. They do look like houses on wheels. Those cars are parked up for, say, on average, some 10, 20 hours a day. I mean, there would be very few that are parked up for anything less than 16 hours a day, I wouldn't have thought. You can get 10 kilowatt hours in 16 hours very easily. So for people who are just average users, slow rate charging, in fact 3 is probably on the high side, never mind 7, and 22 is massive overkill. For people who are commercial drivers or driving a company car, they plough up and down the road, yeah, they're going to need fast chargers. I think probably at that point 22 is too small. My own gut feel. Now these are my opinions, and everyone needs to go and do their sums for themselves. But if you think of the number of hours that somebody's parked for, say in a car park at work, they might be parked at work for 8 hours. If they're charging at work, you need a couple of kilowatts tops to get your 10 kilowatt hours a day back in. But if you are going up and down the road and you're doing 200 miles and you need to totally refill your battery every so often, then 22 kilowatts is not enough. It's going to be a 50 or preferably something bigger if the car will take it. Be aware as well that not all cars will charge at 100 kilowatts if you attach them to a 100 kilowatt charger. So you've got to look at that as well. So that was a convoluted answer to a simple question.
It was, and Craig, recognising that this is a complex area, if you would welcome a conversation offline, please do get in touch. I'm just going to look to my colleagues just to see if they've got anything to add to that discussion.
Yeah, I think we largely agree with that. It really depends where you're parking your car when you're considering the size of the charger and for how long you're going to be parked there. So as Ian said, for domestic users, you're going to be parked for most of the day. For people for workplace charging, you're going to probably be there for at least 1 or 2 hours. So you'd size it accordingly, and it really also, as Ian mentioned, depends on what vehicle you're going to be charging.
Yeah, I think one last thing I'll just chip in as well is, if we want to go to a kind of electric filling station model where everybody has a car that's capable of taking 150 or 200 or 350 kilowatt charge, turns up and fills it up the way that they would fill a car with diesel or petrol today, that focuses all the charging load into either the kind of weekend shopping period when you fill up at the supermarket, or the rush hour at either end of the day. So you're really concentrating on that charging load, you're reducing diversity, and you're probably ensuring it is the most expensive way of doing it for the country. Now, for Northern Power Grid, I'm kind of okay with that, because we will charge people for that privilege of making that size of connection. But I really advise against it. If we need to find a different way to do it.
Okay, thank you, Ian. I just look to my colleague Paris. Anything more to add?
No, I think we've covered it. It's a balance, isn't it? It's a balance between need, capacity available, and all that sort of thing. So I think we've covered it.
And Rachel's just commented as well. Thank you for your comments, Rachel. And Rachel's saying on the 7 kilowatt versus the 22 kilowatt discussion, totally agree with Ian's statement. There are only a handful that can charge at that rate. 11 kilowatt is an option for the workplace in some areas, but it should be 7 kilowatts or 50 kilowatts. So yeah, so thanks for your comments, Rachel. We've got time for probably just one more question if someone has something that they're burning out there that they would like to raise. Whilst we're just reflecting on that, I'm just going to ask Paris for his views. Paris, is there a question that you have continually been asked by our customers and stakeholders? It would be just useful to share with everybody on the webinar today.
I think the one question that I get asked the most is around diversity figures, and I've covered them earlier. So we have our own calculator, demand calculator, which is available on our website. We publish all of our design policies, so customers can always refer to them on our library on our website. It's important to highlight that that's the diversity that we see on our network. And the diversity within the diversity of the premise load alongside to an EV or a heat pump, that's a different story, and it is not necessarily captured in the diversity figures we publish. I would refer customers to the IET code of practice, which talks about diversity in demands. I don't think they've touched on EVs yet, but I know that there's an iteration of that code of practice that will talk about EVs and will provide guidance on how to calculate the maximum demand of a property that has an EV or will have an EV charge point in it. So I think, as I said, we already published some information on diversity figures, and I mentioned earlier our experts and are always available to help either via email, telephone number, or by attending one of our monthly surgeries.
That's great. And so we're coming to you, Ian. Is there a particular question you've been asked lots and lots over the last sort of few months that relate to the topic we're discussing today that would be useful to share with our webinar?
Yeah, I think the one that keeps coming back is there going to be enough network out there? Will the networks be able to cope? And I think my answer there is pretty much yes. Now, if it does go down the electric filling station route, we'll cope, but it'll be expensive, and we'll be charging those filling stations for building those things. If it's domestic, if it's park it, plug it, lock it, leave it, so you charge up wherever you park, every destination has charging available, it will be reasonably straightforward to manage, to be honest.
That's great. Thank you, Ian. So I'm going to conclude the questions there. I'm recognising if there is a question that is particular to you that you would like to ask independent from the webinar, you've got our contact details in the webinar information. Please do get in touch. We welcome your views, the discussion, but also your very specific questions, because we know that a lot of people are thinking this particular topic through, and we are here to help. Now, I've had feedback from you that we've had a tricky moment with our initial poll, so we're going to do another poll. And we may come back to the first one if I'm able. I know a number of you it wasn't clear about where to fill it in. So I'm going to do it step by step, and I'll get, if it doesn't work, if I can have some feedback back straight away, that would be absolutely brilliant. So we have a live poll up today. We'll just go to the screen there. Bear with me one moment. Okay, so this is a tricky topic, and we hope that you've got a bit more of an insight into some of the things that we're preparing and some of the information we have available to you. So we would really like to get a sense from you about whether today's webinar has improved your understanding of what we're doing to support the electrification of transport. There's an A is yes, B is no, C is neutral. And particularly we would like to know what else could we be doing to engage with you or support you. And I've been asked to ask you if you could respond via the question box in front of you. So if we could have a yes, A, B, no, C, neutral, but really importantly, what else can we do to help you? That would be great. I'm just going to hold on a few moments. Brilliant. I can see them coming through now. Thank you so much. I'm going to refer to the original poll in a moment once we've had an opportunity to collect those. I'll just pause for a moment. Yeah, they're coming through now. Great. Because we had a few tricky moments with the original poll, which was asking what industry you're from. So I'm going to respond back to that. So if you get a sense as well of letting us know where you're from, that is via the question box, but I'm going to ask you to type it in, please, so we don't get confused with your outcomes rather than A, B and C. So if you are a consultant, please let us know. You're from local government, fleet manager, you're installing charge points, working for other utilities, or you've got another category, we would love to know that also. Thank you. Brilliant. And some of you are doing both, so fab. Thank you. So just pause a moment for you to complete that, and then we'll conclude the webinar right on time. Okay. Thank you. We're just moving to the end slide to say a very big thank you to all of you that have taken the time with us this lunchtime to spend some time walking through the Maximising the Value of Electric Vehicles for our customers document, and got some of the insight of some of our workings and thinking within Northern Power Grid. We would really welcome you at our other events. Details are included with the slide pack, which you will receive. We've also had feedback that some of you haven't received a link to that document, so we will be ensuring that you do. And similarly, if you want to email us your questions, which we haven't responded to as today, we would welcome that also. So a very big thank you, and we hope you have a great week ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.